If someone asks you one specific question, you should walk away immediately. That's not an exaggeration. Why do certain questions make you uncomfortable without being able to explain why? Why, even if the person is smiling, does your body sense danger? There are questions that aren't looking for answers. They're looking for control. And if you've ever heard one of them, you were already caught in the trap without knowing it. Stick around, because what's coming could change how you see people forever. This is almost always the first question. It pops up right after you express discomfort, doubt, or a legitimate suspicion. It doesn't respond to what you've said. It doesn't analyze the facts. It directly attacks your reaction. Why are you so sensitive? Why are you taking it like that? Why are you overreacting? At that moment, something very specific happens in your mind. You stop thinking about what happened and start thinking about how you feel. The focus shifts. The behavior disappears from the center of the conversation and is replaced by your emotion. Without realizing it, you're no longer talking about the problem. You're justifying your reaction to it. This question works because it introduces shame. It suggests that feeling is a flaw, that reacting is a weakness, that if you were stronger, more mature, or more normal, none of this would affect you. The implicit message is clear. The problem isn't what I did. The problem is you for feeling it. This is where many give in. They lower their voice. They apologize for their tone. They say phrases like, "It wasn't a big deal," or "Maybe I'm exaggerating." And at that moment, the liar has already won the first round. Not because they've proven innocence, but because they've gotten you to doubt your own perception. But there's something important you need to understand. Honest people ask what happened. Manipulative people ask why you feel that way. One thing seeks clarity. The other seeks control. When someone uses this question, they're not trying to understand you. They're trying to train you. To train you to shut up next time. To train you to hesitate before speaking next time. To train you to tolerate a little more next time. And so, little by little, silence becomes a habit. This question doesn't appear at the beginning. It comes when you've already pointed out something concrete, when there's already a crack in the story. And instead of explaining, the person takes a step back and looks at you as if you've hurt them. "Don't you trust me?" At that moment, the conflict changes shape. It's no longer about what happened, but about how you feel toward that person. The conversation shifts from the facts to the relationship, and that move isn't accidental. It's a calculated role reversal. Suddenly, you're the one who has to reassure. You're the one who has to prove something. The person being questioned becomes the emotional victim. They sigh, lower their voice, adopt a hurt tone, and you, without noticing, start explaining why you do trust them, why you didn't mean that, why it wasn't an attack. Here's the trap. Trust isn't demanded. It's built with consistency, with actions that stand up to questions. When someone needs to remind you to trust them, it's usually because they know there are reasons not to. This question also introduces fear. Fear of breaking the bond. Fear of seeming distrustful, cold, or unfair. Fear of being that person who always doubts. And under that fear, many people back down. They change the subject. They apologize for asking. But look closely at the pattern. An honest person clarifies. A manipulative person dramatizes. One explains. The other makes you feel guilty for asking. When someone uses "don't you trust me," they're not defending the truth. They're defending their image. And in doing so, they push you to choose between your intuition and the relationship. Every time you choose the relationship at the expense of your intuition, you lose a little bit of yourself. This question usually appears when the conversation is already well underway, when the person feels like their options are closing in. They don't deny. They don't explain. They don't clarify. They shrug and toss out the phrase as if they're tired. What do you want me to say? At first glance, It seems like surrender. It might even sound like an opening. But in reality, it's another form of evasion. They're not offering the truth. They're handing the responsibility back to you. They're asking you to write the script for them. Something subtle happens here. If you respond, you become the director of the scene. If you say, "I just want the truth," they'll tell you they already said it. If you specify, they'll accuse you of putting words in their mouth. Any option puts you at a disadvantage, because the problem stops being what happened and becomes how you're steering the conversation. This question also conveys annoyance. It implies that you're being demanding, that nothing is enough, that you always want more. The hidden message is, no matter what I say, you'll never be satisfied. And with that, your need for clarity is presented as a flaw. Sincere people don't ask what they should say. They say what happened. They embrace discomfort. They accept consequences. Manipulative people look for the right phrase to calm you down, not the truth that would close the issue. When someone asks you, "What do you want me to say?" they're not looking to repair things. They're looking to end the conversation without taking any responsibility. They want you to declare the end yourself, so they can leave without guilt. And if you accept that game, you learn something dangerous: to settle for empty answers just to get the silence back. This question comes when the tension is already uncomfortable, when the atmosphere is heavy, when the person feels that talking more could bring real consequences. Then they propose a shortcut. Can't we just move on? At first glance, it sounds mature, even reasonable. It seems like an invitation to peace, to forgiveness, to leave what happened behind. But pay close attention to when it appears. It never comes after a clear explanation. It never comes with responsibility. It arrives exactly when there are still unresolved issues. The implicit message is this: talking about this is the problem. Not what happened, but the fact that you keep insisting. Thus, the conversation is redefined. You're no longer asking for clarity. You're stuck in the past. You're no longer seeking understanding. You're preventing progress. Here, a dangerous confusion arises between healing and avoiding. Truly moving forward requires understanding, naming, and taking responsibility. Avoiding only requires wearing you down, and this question banks on the latter. On attrition. On the idea that if you wait long enough, you'll give up. It also appeals to guilt. It suggests that you're the one keeping the conflict alive, that if you were more flexible, everything would be fine. And many people, exhausted, accept. Not because they're at peace, but because they want the discomfort to end. But there's an uncomfortable truth. What isn't spoken doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It seeps into gestures, silences, and resentments. And every time you agree to move on without answers, you train the other person not to be accountable. Honest people aren't in a hurry to turn the page. They understand that a good closure is more important than a quick one. Those who manipulate want to move forward without looking back, because they know what they'd find if they did. This is the final question, the one that appears when all the others have already failed, when they couldn't make you doubt your emotions, your intuition, or your need for answers. Then comes the heaviest blow. Are you really going to throw everything away over this? Here, facts are no longer discussed. The cost is discussed, the shared past, the time invested, the memories, the plans. Everything is put on the table as an emotional debt. And the message is clear. If you move forward, you'll be responsible for the loss. This question turns a boundary into a threat. It makes protecting yourself seem like a destructive act, as if taking care of yourself is synonymous with ruining everything. And many people, faced with that weight, back down. Not because they believe everything is fine, but because they don't want to bear the guilt. But observe the trick. It doesn't ask if what happened was serious. It doesn't ask how to repair the damage. It asks if you dare to leave. It's a way of saying, if you don't accept this, you'll lose a lot. And that's not love, nor friendship, nor honesty. It's fear disguised as a bond. Sincere people understand that some actions have consequences. They accept that not everything can be saved. Manipulative people, on the other hand, use what's been built as an anchor. Not to nurture the relationship, but to prevent you from moving. There's a truth that hurts, but it frees. If maintaining something requires betraying yourself, the price is already too high. It's not you who's throwing everything away over this. It's the lie that made it inevitable. When someone asks you this question, they're not defending what you have. They're defending what they could lose if you decide to respect yourself. If you look at these 5 questions together, a clear pattern emerges. None seek information. None try to understand what happened. All have the same goal, to shift the focus away from the facts and place it on you, on how you feel, how you react, how you decide. The liar doesn't need to convince you of a perfect version. They just need to tire you out from asking questions. That's why these questions don't attack logic. They attack perception. They don't say, this didn't happen. They say, the problem is how you're experiencing it. And when you accept that framework, the truth stops mattering. There's something even deeper. These questions create an invisible hierarchy. One person positions themselves as the judge of what's reasonable, mature, or exaggerated. The other remains in a defensive position, explaining, justifying, softening. That asymmetry is power. There's also a sequence. First, your emotion is questioned. Then your trust. Then your way of asking questions. Later, your persistence. And finally, your decision to leave. Step by step, your room for action is reduced. Not all at once, but slowly until doubting yourself becomes automatic. The important thing to understand is this. When you recognize the pattern, it stops working. Because you no longer answer the question. You observe the intention behind it. You no longer defend yourself. You take a stand. And at that moment, the dynamic changes. Honest people might feel uncomfortable, but they stick to the facts. Manipulative people avoid the facts because they know they lose there. That's why they use questions as tools. Not to dialogue, but to direct. Recognizing this pattern doesn't make you cold or distrustful. It makes you aware. And awareness is the exact point where manipulation stops having space. There's a reason these questions work so well. They don't attack head-on. They slide in. They present themselves as concern, as weariness, as common sense. And that's why they go unnoticed for so long. They don't sound like a lie. They sound like something you've heard before. But now, you know something different. You know that a question can be a form of control, that not all conversations seek understanding. And that feeling uncomfortable isn't a sign of weakness, but of intact perception. It's not about seeing liars everywhere. It's about listening to your internal reaction when someone avoids answering and, instead, pushes you to explain yourself. When the topic shifts from what happened to how you feel about pointing it out. When your need for clarity becomes the problem. At that point, there's no need to discuss further. You need to stop, observe, and decide from a place of self-respect. Remember this. Someone who tells the truth can endure silence, discomfort, and difficult questions. Someone who lies needs you to get tired, to doubt, to back down, because only then can they move forward without accountability. If any of these questions felt familiar, it's no coincidence. You've probably already experienced it. And if you recognize it today, it's because you're ready not to fall again. Next time you hear one of them, don't respond immediately. Breathe. Look at the pattern and choose calmly. That's where your freedom begins.